Welcome to this explainer. You know that heavy, almost industrial weight of modern life you sometimes feel? That persistent, nagging hum of anxiety telling you you're supposed to be somewhere else, doing something more? Well, if you've ever felt that, you are in exactly the right place today. We're going to take a deep dive into some really eye opening source material about the hidden structures of the human experience. We're charting the whole journey today, from unconscious inherited programming all the way to a vibrant, self actualized state of sovereignty. So let's just get right into it. So, why do we sabotage ourselves? Why do so many of us genuinely fear success or endlessly repeat these toxic cycles as adults? It's like the second the drama stops and a quiet, peaceful reality finally sets in, we push it away. It's a huge paradox, right? But for a lot of people, peace just feels completely foreign. Honestly, it even feels unsafe. We instinctively reach for a problem to solve, or we drum up chaos just to feel something familiar. The sources we're exploring today suggest this self-sabotage isn't just bad luck. It's not some fundamental character flaw, and it's definitely not a lack of willpower. The answer is actually deeply rooted in a script we were handed way before we even knew how to read or think critically for ourselves. All right, let's jump into section 1, the invisible childhood download. To really get why we act the way we do, we have to recognize that massive parts of our lives, our reactions, our boundaries, our internal limits, they were shaped by invisible forces long before we understood what life even was. Think of the human mind in childhood like a sponge without a filter, or a computer downloading files with no firewall. We don't question our environment, we just download it. A child absorbs literally everything around them: the unexpressed anxieties of their parents, the unspoken tension at the dinner table, the rigid beliefs of society, and of course, those limiting labels slapped on them by teachers or peers. We are implicitly told what we can and cannot become, how loud we're allowed to be, and exactly what parts of ourselves we have to hide just to be loved. Then we hit adulthood, and this right here is the trap. We wake up wondering why we feel so stuck in relationships or careers that just drain the life out of us. Well, it's because we're just running the unconscious programs written for us decades ago, looping the exact same emotional reactions over and over. Reacting to a boss the exact same way you reacted to a demanding parent, shrinking in conflict to survive, just like you did when you were small. But there is a third phase for those who actually seek it out: awakening. This is that profound aha moment of becoming conscious of these repeating patterns. It's the realization that the software running in the background of your mind, you can actually rewrite it. The source gives us this massive realization. You are not your conditioning. Just let that sink in for a second. This right here is where the shift toward hope actually begins. The very moment you become conscious of the pattern, you stop being trapped by it. You start to realize that you are not that harsh inner critic telling you you aren't enough. You are not your ingrained fear of abandonment. You're not your shame. And you are absolutely not the survival mask you built to protect yourself. Because we all do it, right? We all craft these masks: the overachiever, the class clown, the quiet people pleaser, just to navigate a world that felt completely overwhelming. But realizing that this mask isn't your actual face, that changes absolutely everything. You can rewire the circuitry. You can heal. You get to choose your identity again. Moving on to section 2, waking up from autopilot. So how do we transition away from that autopilot state? It requires a deeply inward journey. To reclaim our minds, the source outlines 3 really vital practical steps: meditation and stillness, honest reflection, and shadow work. Now, it's super important to understand that the source material emphasizes these aren't just trendy spiritual buzzwords to make us feel relaxed. They are tactical tools required to literally shatter that gray unconscious programming. Stillness is incredibly confronting, right? Because when the external noise finally drops, you actually hear your own internal machinery. Then there's honest reflection, which requires looking at your life without making excuses for the cycles you perpetuate. And finally, shadow work. This is the brave process of looking at the parts of yourself you banished to the basement: your anger, your jealousy, your untamed desires, all those parts you were told were bad when you were downloading your childhood script. Integrating those hidden parts is exactly how you reconnect with the whole, authentic version of yourself that existed before the world told you who to be. There is a stark, almost heartbreaking contrast in how we can choose to spend our limited time here. We can stay locked in the inherited program, which, let's be real, is where a vast majority of people stay their entire lives. They live on pure autopilot. They wear their survival masks to work, into their marriages, and with their kids. They operate fundamentally out of fear and scarcity, tragically just throwing their hands up and saying, well, this is just who I am. This is just how life is. Or we can break from the script. We can step into our authentic selves. This is the vibrant, incredible reality of becoming a conscious creator.
It means doing the healing work so that every single word you speak and every boundary you set comes from a place of active choice, rather than just a triggered reaction. When you choose this path, you finally step out of the passenger seat and take the wheel of your own existence.
All right, section 3, the illusion of the system. Now, let's zoom out a bit, because all this internal programming we just talked about, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It is heavily reinforced by massive societal structures that actually thrive on our disconnection. The text argues that we were sold a series of profound, perfectly marketed lies from the moment we entered the education system. We were told that freedom meant acquiring massive amounts of debt, mortgages, student loans, car payments, stuff that effectively ties us to jobs we just endure rather than love. We were told that success meant burning ourselves out, wearing our exhaustion like a badge of honor to prove our worth. We were conditioned to believe that obedience to the established path equaled safety, and for a long time, so many of us bought it because it was all we ever saw. But according to the source, the system actively feeds on our fear, fuels our constant comparison to our neighbors, and drowns us in digital distraction just to keep us working endlessly to survive. Because think about it, a tired, distracted populace doesn't have the energy to question the cage they're running in. And the source points out something really interesting about our social divisions, specifically the relentless left versus right political paradigm. It frames this as a manufactured distraction. It operates almost like a magician's sleight of hand. The observation here is that while humanity exhausts its energy fighting these bitter cultural battles with neighbors and family members over political divisions, the real power structures orchestrating the economy and society remain completely untouched. The text notes that endless division and a constant looping cycle of media-driven fear are utilized so that a small group at the top can consolidate even more control and wealth. They're extracting value from our divided labor, our divided attention, and our divided energy. It paints a pretty intense picture of a societal machine deliberately designed to keep people dependent, outraged, and fundamentally looking in the wrong direction while the architecture of their lives is managed from above. Which brings us to section 4, the target on wild souls. The system depends on people abandoning who they really are. It's a heavy thought, right? This societal machine requires a devastating trade to function properly. It essentially asks people to trade their raw authenticity for societal approval. It quietly asks them to trade their soul and their passions for comfort and predictability, and to surrender their deepest inner truths just for a fleeting sense of belonging. But the thing is, in every rigid system, there are always those who just can't make that trade anymore. Something deep inside them just refuses to be extinguished. They stop trying to squeeze themselves into a mold that was never built for human flourishing in the first place.
So who are these people who refuse to play along? The source identifies them as the wild souls, the deep feelers, the truth speakers, the creators, and the rebels. The text speaks incredibly passionately about these specific individuals. And why are they so significant? Because a deep feeler intuitively senses the wrongness of a superficial system. A creator proves to everyone else that you can actually build a different way of life, shattering the illusion that the cage is your only option. The moment someone becomes fully comfortable standing completely alone in their truth, they become incredibly dangerous to that overarching illusion. They walk away from toxic societal patterns and corporate treadmills, even when it costs them prestige or comfort. They refuse to fake smiles just to keep the people around them comfortable in their slumber. And because these individuals directly threaten the machine's absolute reliance on mass conformity, they are almost always the ones targeted, ridiculed, or marginalized first.
And that leads us to our final part, Section 5, reclaiming your inner sovereignty. This kind of resistance naturally brings us to the most vibrant concept in this explainer. The source totally redefines the word sovereignty. We're not talking about geopolitics or national borders here. It is a deeply personal, radical reclamation of your own purpose, completely separate from the external systems that drain the human spirit. True sovereignty is about remembering that human beings were never, ever meant to live as biological cogs in an industrial machine. We were meant to create art, to build real communities, to love fiercely without transaction, and to live with immense breathing purpose. It is the conscious decision to step completely out of those invisible cages of debt, fear, and inherited trauma, and to build a life dictated by your own authentic values, rather than what society expects of you. The ones rising right now are the ones who learn the truth through pain. The leaders of this great shift in consciousness aren't necessarily the elite, or the comfortable, or the ones who played the game perfectly. No, they're the ones who struggled against the grain. They're the ones who lost everything, hit absolute rock bottom, kept going, and crucially, they completely stopped fearing the system. Think about it. When you've lost the status or the approval that the system uses as leverage against you, you realize you're still breathing. You realize you're still whole.
And the incredible takeaway here is that once individuals stop fearing the system and its judgments, the system permanently loses all of its power over them. They become fundamentally unstoppable.
So, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. What script is running beneath your thoughts right now? Are you running the inherited download from decades ago, or are you actively becoming the conscious creator of your own vibrant life? It's time to break the cycle. Stop living on autopilot. Become intimately aware of that hidden script, because the literal moment you see it for what it is, the door to the cage swings wide open. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep reflecting, and as always, keep seeking the truth.